What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So over the course of the next 2 weeks, we're going to be working on putting a lift kit on my 2015 F350 build. Now, as I mentioned before, this particular build is going to be more of a budget-friendly build. I'm not trying to go with the highest end lift kit. I'm not trying to go with the highest end shocks. I'm not trying to go with the most expensive wheels or anything like that. I'm actually trying to build this truck on a little bit of a budget to see how it looks and to compare a budget-friendly truck versus something that costs a little bit more. Okay, as you see out here, this is my 2015 Ford F350 Powerstroke diesel. This does have an 8-foot bed. As of right now, it just has a leveling kit with 20-inch wheels on 35s. In the lift kit that I went with this time is a Skyjacker 8.5-inch lift kit. Now, the reason I say it's a budget-friendly lift kit is because on my last F350 build, I did an 8-inch striker lift kit. Now that lift kit was a little over $8,000. And on my previous build before that, which was a 2016 Ram 2500 Cummins, I had an 8-inch McGoy's lift kit. I think that lift kit was around $5,000. This 8.5-inch Skyjacker lift kit, it's a fraction of the cost. But I wanted to try it out to see, does it really matter if you spend a ton of money on a more expensive name brand lift kit? Or can you get a quality lift kit and save money at the same time? So that's what we're going to be doing on this build. Now, as you see over here, I started getting some of the parts in. There are a couple that are back ordered that should be coming this week. So this particular lift kit has the 8-inch coils in the front. We have our 4-link drop brackets here that are going to replace the radius arms. We have our track bar relocation bracket here. Back here, we have our add-a-leaf springs back here for the back of the truck. As of right now, we have 2 Skyjacker M95 shocks for the back. These particular shocks here are pretty comparable to maybe a Bilstein shock, but a little bit better. I have some longer U-bolts for the back blocks there. I have my front 4 links here. I went with a BDS carrier bearing drop bracket here. So because my truck has a 2-piece drive shaft, this carrier bearing drop should drop the drive shaft down a little bit to fix some of the geometry due to the lift. I have my rear blocks back here for the back of the truck. These right here are going to be the bump stop extension brackets, brake line extension brackets. We have sway bar extension brackets here. We have some extended brake lines, some hardware. We have an extended drop pitman arm there. So we should be good to go. The only thing I'm waiting on is, again, 2 more M95 shocks for the front. And then I'm waiting on the Skyjacker dual steering stabilizer as well. Now, before we start installing some of these parts, I do actually think I'm going to paint a couple. I'm not going to paint everything because I'm going for a slightly different look. They are already powder coated black, but I'm going to go ahead and paint them white. And then I'm probably going to paint my 4 links here white. But I don't want to go white on everything. I only want to go white on a couple parts to just make the white stand out but not be overwhelming. As far as what I'm painting it with, I'm doing it pretty cheap. I have some bonding primer here to just paint over the powder coat to really get a good grip. And I just have some gloss white fusion all-in-one paint and primer spray paint here that I'm going to be painting some of those parts with. Okay, so far so good. As you can see here, this is just the first coat of the bonding primer. I pretty much just keep going around in a circle, following the coil eye down, taking my time, getting a nice even coverage all the way around. And then when I get to the bottom, I'll kneel down and try to spray up and go around the coil this way to spray from different angles. So I did that on both. Okay, so far so good. Again, this is just a basic paint job that I'm doing to these coils on top of the factory black powder coating. But overall, as you see here, it does look pretty good. There's a little drip like right there. But overall, it's actually not too bad. So again, what I'll probably do is just let this all dry, do a last final layer of paint just to fill in a couple of little crevices that may have been caused by a few drips. And then I'll let that dry overnight. And then probably tomorrow, I'll hit them both with 1 or 2 coats of clear coat. And then they should be good. And then I can start working on taping off the 4 links and painting those. So I had to wait a couple days because there was a slight delay on my 2 front shocks, which just showed up today, and my dual steering stabilizer kit that also just showed up today. So now that we have all of the parts here, we could start with the install. Now out here, I first went ahead and disconnected both batteries, because anytime you're jacking up your truck to put a lift kit on it and you're really getting it nice and high, you should disconnect the batteries. That way the sensors and the ECM don't start registering something weird and throwing codes and all of that. So I went ahead and I jacked up the back pretty high. I put my jacks underneath. I got some jack blocks there. Have my jack out here ready to make a few adjustments. You don't want to put your jacks under the axles, because the main part of doing a lift kit is we have to get the frame of the truck lifted up, but we need to let the axles droop. Once we get enough droop to where the wheels are still off the ground, but we have enough droop, then we can actually go ahead and start taking out our coils and everything else. So again, if you're doing this in your driveway, jacking up your truck high enough to fit an 8-inch lift kit is sometimes a little bit tricky. So let me go ahead and take the wheels off, make a few adjustments to the jack stands, and then we're gonna start working on taking some of the factory parts off so that we can put some of the new parts back on. So I'll be right back in a minute. Okay, so far so good. So again, the first thing I did was jack the truck up. Now I do have my jack under the axle as a temporary brace, but after I got the wheels taken off and got everything jacked up, the first thing I did was take this bolt out right here to release my brake line bracket there. Then I went ahead and disconnected my wheel speed sensor. There's a couple little bolts right here, and then a zip tie over here, and then right up under the bottom here, which was very convenient, right here is where the harness is to unplug your wheel speed sensors. Now again, if you're wondering why this might look a little different right here, is because this truck had a leveling kit on it first. So I will have to take this puck out and take these shock extension brackets off when I move forward with the rest of this lift kit. But the next thing I want to do is maybe try to disconnect the brake line and put the brake line extension in there, so that when I do drop the axle down all the way to get the coil in, I shouldn't be stretching the brake line at all. So let me start looking at that a little closer, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so the next thing I did was extend my front brake lines, which are these brake lines here that look like a little Z with this gold double-sided fitting at the very end. But you have to be quick at doing this. So get some paper towels, some rubber gloves. So you want to use a wrench and disconnect this line right here, my finger is, from here. As soon as you disconnect that, hurry up and thread this one in, and then attach the bottom piece to this bottom one here. So now our front brake line is extended. So the next thing I'll probably work on underneath is disconnecting the track bar so that we can put our new track bar relocation bracket on. We can go ahead and put our new drop pitman arm in. So let me start working under there, and we'll be right back. Okay, so now that we're under the truck, the first thing I did was disconnect my shock, which was attached right here and then attached over there to that bracket there. So I took that old shock out. So the next thing I want to do is start disconnecting my track bar here. Take this bolt out right here so we could drop our track bar down, and that'll give us space to get to all the bolts to take this track bar bracket completely out. Once we remove that track bar bracket, then that gives us full access to our pitman arm retaining nut, and then we can use our pitman arm puller, pull down this pitman arm, and then we're gonna go ahead and replace that with the new pitman arm. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let me start disconnecting the track bar and the track bar relocation bracket, and then we'll get to that next. So I'll be right back in a minute. Okay, so we went ahead and removed the track bar factory bracket here. Again, you have two bolts that are gonna be up towards the side over here. And then on the back, there's this triple bolt bracket here that sits right behind those three holes right there. So we went ahead and did that. Now we have access to our pitman arm retaining nut. So now you're gonna have to get yourself one of these big giant 46 millimeter sockets, and that'll take the pitman arm nut off. Then once you do that, you're going to need a heavy duty pitman arm puller to pull that pitman arm off. And then we're going to have to remove the pitman arm from this end over here. So we're gonna get to that here in a minute, but let me start taking the retaining nut off, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so you are gonna need a pitman arm puller to get this pitman arm off. Now, there are different sizes out there. I have a heavy duty pitman arm puller right here. Again, basically what it does is you unthread this bolt right here. These two arms right here with these little wings go up along the sides of the pitman arm and grab across the top up here. And then you tighten it down here to make sure it has a nice grip. And then if you see up here, you see that little point right there? So this little point sticks right in the bottom of this stem right here. So basically, as you're threading this in with some type of a socket, it's pushing on this, which is pulling the pitman arm off, because this is on there extremely tight, and you're not going to get it off with anything else but probably a pitman arm puller. So let me go ahead and get this threaded on there, and then we'll pull it off. Okay, so I started off using a breaker bar just to get this pitman arm loose from the stem, and then I can finish it off with just a basic socket. And we are done. So normally I do this first before I actually remove the pitman arm, but I forgot to, so I'm doing it now. So I just slid the pitman arm back in place without taking anything back off. So I line it back up the way it comes off, but you should do this first. Try to mark your spleen up here and your pitman arms. That way, you know, when you put the new drop pitman arm in, you can kind of line it up in a similar way. That way your steering is not going to be that far off when you get this all installed. So now all I have to do is remove the pitman arm from this nut over here. I might need to use my puller again just to pull this pitman arm off of this stem over here. And then once I get that off, we're gonna go ahead and install the new drop pitman arm. So let me work on doing that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and I put my new drop pitman arm in. And then basically what I did was I sat the original one directly on top of this one to line it up. And then I took this little black mark here where my thumb is, and I marked a black mark on this one. So that way I can line this black mark up with the black mark that was on the spleen. That way everything should line up at the end. Then you want to make sure you take your pitman arm nut, make sure it's nice and clean on the threads, real nice and clean. If it's not, make sure you clean those threads. If it's not in great shape, go buy a new pitman arm retaining nut. But this one's in pretty good shape. Then you're going to want to take some red Loctite, okay? Really put some red Loctite all in those threads. Then you're going to put your pitman arm nut back on. I can't remember exactly what the torque specs are for it. It's probably over 350 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, it is supposed to be extremely tight. So I end up just using my impact wrench and tightening it down as far as I possibly can. So let me go ahead and get this installed and we'll be right back. Okay, so we went ahead and we got the new pitman arm installed and we got the pitman arm retaining nut put back on with some red Loctite, torqued down so it's nice and tight. Then we went ahead and we installed our track bar drop bracket. Now you are going to use the factory bolts here and in the back part right here, but you're going to use the new supply bolts that they give you right here. There's going to be 3 large bolts. You're going to use a bolt, a washer, and then a spacer in between because this track bar bracket slides over this main bracket right here. And then on the back side, you're going to use another washer and then a lock nut on the back. So again, I just put them on loosely for now so that I could tighten down these bolts. Then I could go back in and tighten down those bolts, and then we'll be done with all of that. I did go ahead and loosely put my sway bar drop brackets on here. Again, as you can see, they are a little bit loose right here. They're not tightened down all the way. So I just stuck those on just like that. You want the full section over here facing out. You want the open section here facing to the center of the truck. That way you can access your bolts to tighten everything down. So again, after I tighten up my bolts for the track bar bracket, the next thing I'm going to do, we're going to start moving on over here to get the shocks and the coils put on. So let me do that and we'll be right back. Okay, so we went ahead and we removed the factory shock. Now, right now, I just have the jack sitting underneath of the axle right here. Now I'm just going to go ahead and lower the axle a little bit to get this coil out. So I only have to drop it a little bit more and then I could take the whole coil out. Now, if I don't have enough space to put the new coil in, I probably will need to jack the truck up a little higher on the driver's side over here to get the frame higher so that the axle can drop lower. But we'll get to that here in a minute. So let me go ahead, drop the axle down just a little bit more because as you can see here, I have a little bit of play on the coil now. So I only need to drop it down a tad bit more to get the coil out. And then we're going to go ahead and remove this lift block over here. And then we're going to go ahead and see if we can sit in our new coil. So let me work on doing that and I'll be right back. Okay, so here's where we're at so far. I did get the track bar drop bracket installed and got the track bar hooked back up. I did get the drop pitman arm installed and got the steering linkage arm hooked back up. I did get the coils in, I did get the front shocks in. Now I was a little bit surprised, they look like they're upside down, but it is set up to be installed this way. So I emailed them just to confirm, but they are installed. I did go ahead and get the sway bar drop brackets installed, but I don't have the sway bar hooked back up 100% yet because I don't have the axle lifted up to where I want it to be yet. Plus, I still have to work on removing the radius arms and putting the 4 links on. Again, it's going slowly, but again, I'm doing this by myself in my driveway, so it is going to take a few days for me to get this all done. So tomorrow we're going to pick up where we left off and continue this project. Okay, we're back. It's the next day and I've been working on the front 4 links and so far so good. They are a little bit troublesome, again, when you're trying to do this in a driveway with limited tools and limited jacks. But if you did this in a professional shop, it would probably go a lot easier. But if we come down underneath, okay, so you're going to want to install your 4-link drop brackets to the factory radius arm brackets just like this. The back plate right here goes towards the back and it slides up in between your factory bracket. And then you're going to use a bolt with a washer and then a washer and then a lock nut on the inside. And then you're going to send this bolt with a washer through the inside to the outside with a washer and lock nut on the outside. The front hole up here is what's going to go through both of these brackets and go through your top 4-link. Now at the bottom down here, they do give you new hardware, but for some reason, the new hardware bolts was not fitting through my mounting bracket down here for the bottom of the 4-link. So I just ended up using the factory bolt down there, but I did use the new hardware up here. Now the top 4-link is gonna come with these 2 little brackets that stick out the end. That way you can actually zip tie your wheel speed sensor wire to that. And there are measurements. So from the center opening where the bolt goes down here, to the center opening of your bolt up here on the top link, assuming the 8.5-inch lift, you're going to want to measure that at 32.5 inches from this center here to that center down there for the top one. The bottom 4-link is going to be measured down here from the center to this center right here. That's going to be 35 3/8 inch. So they're claiming that if you measure your 4-links to those specifications, that should put you in a very close realm of keeping everything centered. Now you do want to go take your truck to a professional and have them do an alignment, and then maybe they can make a few adjustments for you, but this should get you going right now. So I went ahead and did all of this on both sides. You only want to do one at a time. That way your axle isn't going crazy on you. Now, when you're doing the 4-links and you're unbolting your shocks and your radius arm, your axle's going to want to shift a little bit side to side and front to back and rotate forward and back. So when I needed to make a few adjustments, I used a ratchet strap. So if I needed to pull this driver's side axle back, I would hook up a ratchet strap down there at the axle and then maybe hook it up over here to the frame, and then I would ratchet the axle back towards me. Now, if I needed to make a few adjustments to fit my bolts in up here and I needed this axle to go forward, I would come up front and hook the strap to the axle and then hook the other end of my ratchet strap up here to the frame somewhere and then ratchet it, and then that would pull the axle forward. So I had to do that a little bit back and forth on both sides to get everything lined up and get all my bolts in. But so far, the 4-links are mounted. I just have to go in here and zip tie my cables to the top of the 4-link. But for the most part, the front is pretty much done. I did go ahead and put my factory tires back on for now, just in case, mainly for safety, in case one of the jacks would fail. But so far, the front is almost done. Next, I'm gonna be working on the dual steering stabilizer here in the front. Once that's all done, then probably tomorrow, we're gonna start tackling the back. So let me keep working on the front. Let me get this dual steering stabilizer installed, and then we'll come back with an update there. Okay, so we got the front dual steering stabilizer installed, which was really not that hard at all. All you have to do is take this main bracket. It's gonna go above the front drag bar, but under the axle. And the bracket has a little bit of an arch around the bottom of the axle. Then you're gonna take your 2 large U-bolts, put them down through, put your washer and your lock nuts on. Over here, you're gonna slide this main post in to the front. It goes down from the top, and then you're gonna put a washer and lock nut on the bottom. And then this post is what your shocks are going to slide over top of. And now you are gonna have to put the rubber bushings in through the main part of the shock, but they just slide in. Put a little bit of grease inside the rubber bushing, that way it slides over the post, and then go ahead and put your washer and lock nuts on the top. So that's pretty much the center. Over here, you're going to take these brackets. They are side specific. So on the driver's side, you want it to come straight out and angle out towards the middle of the truck. And then you're going to put another post here. Same thing. Put your bushings in the shock. Put your post through the bracket. Put your lock washer and your lock nut in the bottom. Come up top, put a washer, lock nut, bolt that down. And then you're going to have the two smaller U-bolts over your drag link here. And then you're going to go ahead and put your lock washer and lock nuts on the bottom. And then to make sure everything is centered properly, from this bolt here to this bolt here should be roughly 19.5 inches on both sides. And then this rubber boot just slides before you mount it over here. You're going to pull the shock out, slide the boot over the shock, and then slide the shock over the post. These rubber boots just kind of protect the shock a little bit more from dirt and debris and mud. But overall, everything's mounted, everything's nice and tight, and we are good to go there. Okay, so I went ahead and I made a few adjustments to the brake line. I did get the factory brake line bracket off. There's basically a little clip here. You see that little clip right there at the top? So all you have to do is take a screwdriver or a pair of pliers and pop that clip off. And then this clip right here, see how at the bottom there's like a flat edge and then it's round? All you have to do is twist it and then it pops off. Then you go ahead and just slide your new bracket on and then use the clip to clip it back on and make it nice and tight. Now, I just have mine zip tied here for now because I don't have a drill bit that's sharp enough to go through this steel. So I'm gonna have to do that at a later time, but I have everything zip tied out of the way. Everything's good to go. The brake lines are not in the way of anything at all, but eventually I will pick up a new drill bit. I will drill a couple holes right here and bolt that bracket down nice and tight, and then we'll be good to go. And I went ahead and did that on the other side as well. Just like that. So again, everything's zip tied out of the way for now because again, I don't have a drill bit to drill through that thick steel, but I will eventually get to that. But for now, I did get the bracket off. I did get the Skyjacker extension bracket put on. I got everything extended and everything's zip tied and held on nice and tight. So far, everything's going pretty good. I pretty much have the whole front of the truck done. So I'm gonna take a break for today, and then probably in the next day or so, we're gonna start tackling the back. Once we get the back done, we'll go ahead and install the carrier bearing drop kit just to kind of balance out our drive shaft a little bit, and everything should be good. So let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we're working on the back now. So I did get the back wheels taken off. I do have the back of the truck jacked up on some jack stands at the back part of the frame. I do have a jack under my rear axle. I have a motorcycle jack just under the front part of the axle, again, just for extra stability. I did go ahead and put a bungee cord up top here down to the axle on both sides, again, just for a little safety precaution. Then I went ahead and disconnected my shocks. I just have them sitting up here. It's real simple. There's one bolt at the bottom, one bolt at the top. So that's where it bolts at the bottom, and then it bolts right up behind the frame here on the top. So again, before you start removing the shocks and the U-bolts, make sure your rear axle is completely stabilized using a jack. And then again, I would even recommend some bungee cords at either side, because once you disconnect those shocks and once you disconnect your U-bolts, your rear axle can literally fall to the ground. So you want to make sure it's stabilized and not moving anywhere, okay? So the next thing we want to do, now that we have the shocks and U-bolts removed from both sides, you want to come down underneath and pull your airline hose off your back axle and disconnect these little hoses here from the bracket. Real simple, they just kind of pop off. Again, just like the front, we need to start paying attention to all of the hoses and cables that is hooked up back here, because again, we are going to have to lower the rear axle to put the new taller blocks in and change out our leaf spring with the add-a leaf. So again, you're just gonna have to unclip some of these hoses to give yourself a little bit of room. Now the kit does come with some extended brake lines here. You're gonna disconnect the brake line here. That's basically how I installed the extended brake line cables right here. These little clips right here, them touching on the front, if you take a screwdriver, they'll pop right off. And then when you unbolt your brake line from that bracket, the factory bracket pulls off the back. That's where this part right here is normally bolted down there. So you just take your extended brake line, tap it up here. It comes down to the metal elbow right here. This fitting here slides through the hole, and then you put your clip back on and it holds it in place. Tighten everything down and your brake lines are good. I went ahead and took the U-bolts off. Now we need to take apart the leaf pack to put our add-a leaf in. So to do this, we need to put clamps on both sides of the leaf pack to compress them because they are under pressure. So before you start messing with this bolt, you need to put your C-clamps in to keep the pressure on the leaf springs. Then underneath, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little bolt right here, but it's like a round head, so it's not really a bolt head. So you're gonna have to use something that can grip onto that and hold that still while you try to unloosen the nut from the top. If you can't seem to get a grip of that bolt and you just can't get this bolt out, you can take a cutting wheel and just cut that bolt off the bottom and then just pull the whole bolt out if it's too rusty to get out. So let me go ahead and start working on taking this bolt out, and then we're gonna go ahead and put our leaf pack in. So I'll be right back in a minute. Okay, so real quick, my truck came with like a heavier duty towing leaf spring at the very top. This is just for extra heavy duty towing. If you're weighting down the bed a lot, these upper leaves right here kind of curve up and they hit these little bump stops up here. Now, I don't really tow that much or that heavy with this truck, so I'm not too concerned with the top leaf. But by factory, this little spacer was underneath right here. But if I use the spacer, the bolt that Skyjacker supplied isn't long enough to go all the way through. So I can always eventually buy longer bolts later and add this back in if I want. But I took it out, and then what I did was I lined my leaf springs up at the bottom using the C-clamps loosely, holding it there, putting the leaf springs on the C-clamps to line everything up. And then I took the bolt and slid it down from the top so that I can line all my leaves up so that the bolt goes straight through. Once the bolt goes straight through, then I adjust my C-clamps back a little closer, like here and here, and then I start tightening them up. And then once it gets tight enough, I'll pull the bolt back out from the top and feed the bolt in from the bottom as you should, and then put the nut at the top. You never want to tighten the nut to pull the leaves together. That's not good. You want to pinch the leaves together using the C-clamps, and then once they're tight and sandwiched together, then you go ahead and tighten your bolt down at the very end. So let me finish doing that. I'll go ahead and do the other side real quick, and then we'll start working on our extension blocks. So I'll be right back in a minute. Now all I have to do is add my rear block in. And you see how the rear block is a little lower up here in the front where my finger is, and a little higher towards the back. You want the high side of your block towards the back of the truck and the lower side of the block towards the front of the truck. So now, because both sides are loose on the axle, I can kind of like push the axle down a little bit on an angle here to get one of the blocks in. To get to the other side, I might have to lower my jack to feed the block back in, and then we're gonna jack it back up to get the block locked back into the leaf pack. So once we do that, all we have to do is put our U-bolts back in, tighten everything back down, and we're done with the back. Okay, so we're back, and we're pretty much done with the back. Now, when it comes to the blocks, this kit doesn't quite do it the way I would prefer. They actually have you stacking their Skyjacker block on top of the axle, and then you stack your factory block that has your bump stop piece right here. You stack that on top of their block. Now, there are pins. There'll be a pin at the bottom that locks into the axle. There's a pin on this block that locks into this block. And then there's a pin on the top of this block that locks into the bottom of your leaf spring. So to get them stacked, make sure your brake lines are extended first, make sure any cables are out of the way. Then you're going to make sure your shock is not hooked up and your axle is sitting on a jack. Then you're going to lower the jack. That'll give you some space to stack your blocks. Once you get the blocks set on both sides, go ahead and lift it up until everything lines up, and then throw your U-bolts back on, tighten them down, and you're good to go. And then you just go ahead and tighten your shock back on, and then you're good to go there. So overall, the back is not that hard. Again, typically, I don't always recommend stacking blocks, but it is something you can do. It's just not the most highly recommended thing to do. So if you are going to run a more affordable lift kit like this where they're stacking blocks, what I would recommend doing, which is also what I'll probably be doing soon, is I'll probably just have my buddy throw a few beads of tack welding around here, kind of welding these two together so that they don't kind of spin out of whack. Now, again, these are under severe pressure. When you really tighten down these U-bolts and you're under pressure of the truck, they're not going to move. But if you are doing some off-roading, I would probably have these welded together. But overall, the back's done. We got the add-a leaf right here. The add-a leaf goes right underneath your main stack of leaves here. Then this is your bottom plate here. So right between your double stack main plate right here that bolts up at the top, you're going to put your add-a leaf right below that. Again, we got that all bolted down. We have our towing spring on top. I still have enough slack in my emergency brake line there, and I'm pretty good with that. So overall, everything seems to be pretty good. All we have to do now is go underneath, put on our carrier bearing drop bracket. I have two. I bought a BDS one, which is a little bigger, and then there is a slightly smaller carrier bearing drop bracket that comes with the Skyjacker kit. I'm not sure which one I'm going to put on. I might try them both and see which one looks better, but we're going to do that next. After I do the carrier bearing drop bracket, All that's left to do is I just have to adjust my brackets for my front bump stops and we are done. But overall, the back is done. Again, if you see here, that's our rear brake line extension cables. Everything's mounted. We got our blocks put on. We got our new extended U-bolts put on. Everything's torqued down nice and tight. I made sure a lot of the cables are all zip tied out of the way. So we are good. So now I can just go ahead, put my wheels back on, lower the jack, and we're done with the back. So let me do that and we'll continue on. This is an 8-foot bed, so I have the 2-piece drive shaft in the back. So this pivot point here, this is the carrier bearing. Now to install a carrier bearing drop bracket like this, all you have to do is set up a jack maybe right here, holding the bottom of this drive shaft. So when you take out this bolt here and the bolt on this side over here, this is going to fall down some. So you want to basically just kind of put a jack here to hold that. And then we're going to install the carrier bearing drop bracket up here above that, and then this bracket will screw into this bracket here that we're mounting up there first. So it's a little hard to do this while holding a camera, so let me do this first and I'll come back and show you how it looks. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm just using a jack underneath the drive shaft here, and I already have the carrier bearing drop bracket installed to the top of the frame over here. So now all I have to do is just lower the drive shaft down a little bit, spin this back around, and then add my bolts in right there and right there with a little blue Loctite, and we'll be done. Now again, if you're doing this, you're going to want to research the proper amount of drop bracket for your carrier bearing based on what lift kit you have. Typically, about every inch of lift, you need to adjust your carrier bearing down about 1/4 of an inch. So a 4-inch lift kit would require about a 1-inch drop. Now, being that this is an 8.5-inch lift kit, this is about a 2.5-inch drop up here. So that's why it's so big. But let me go ahead and finish this up real quick and we'll be right back. Okay, so real quick. So I did not end up using the BDS carrier bearing drop kit. This one right here is a 3-inch drop. So when I put the BDS one on, it lowered my axle a little too far, and I didn't like the angle at which it was. So I took the BDS drop bracket off and put the Skyjacker carrier bearing drop bracket in, and everything lined up pretty good. Okay, so to do the front bump stop extensions, it's very simple. All you have to do is take off your bump stops from the very front. They just pretty much pop out of these cups. And then you're going to take out these 2 small little bolts that are bolted into your frame that holds the cups on. Once you do that, you're going to have to take a 3/8 drill bit and widen the hole of the cup to a 3/8. And then you're going to use the supplied hardware and bolt the cups down to these brackets just like that. So you're going to use a bolt, a washer, and then a lock nut. So you're basically just mounting the cup to the bottom of this bracket, and you're going to do that on both sides. Then you're going to go ahead and put your cups in. They pretty much just pop in place. Then you're going to come under the truck, and on both sides behind the coil, this is where your bump stop was originally screwed in. So again, it's open up here. So all you're going to do is take your 3/8 drill bit and just drill that hole out to 3/8 wide. And then you're just going to use the longer bolts with the washers and lock nut to bolt your bump stop drop brackets right back in place. So let me do that and we'll be right back. Okay, so we are pretty much done at this point. So we went ahead and we got our new bump stop extension brackets installed. So that went easy. And then the last thing you probably want to do is determine what you want to do with your front drive shaft. Again, this is a budget-friendly lift kit, so it did not come with a new extended front drive shaft or spacers. So let's get under the truck and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so we're under the truck, and this is your front drive shaft here that's activated when you turn on your 4-wheel drive. Now, if you see up here, this boot right here was extended all the way back to about here, which is probably the max that you want it to go, but I wouldn't really trust it. Because if you end up activating 4-wheel drive and your front end is traveling up and down a little bit, you could pull this out of the yoke, and that's not going to be a good thing. So you have a couple choices. You could purchase a brand new extended front drive shaft, but let's be honest, that's going to probably run you around $1,000. The second option you have is remove this front drive shaft and take it to a specialized drive shaft shop that can extend it for you, which would maybe be half the cost of a brand new drive shaft. Or you could go the budget-friendly way, which is what I did, and install a spacer at the back. Now, this spacer here was very cheap. It was about no more than 60 bucks, and it came with the hardware. And after I installed it, then it shifted my drive shaft forward, and now I don't have to worry about that popping out of the yoke. Now, this drive shaft will spin freely because your four-wheel drive is not activated. So to lock the drive shaft, you have two options. The hard way, which is go up in the truck, activate your four-wheel drive. That'll lock this into place while you remove your factory bolts, which look like this. So to remove the factory bolts that look like this, it's a 12 millimeter 12-point socket. So you could use a socket or a wrench. A wrench is probably easier. This is a 12 millimeter ratcheting 12-point wrench. So the easy way to do this is take a large screwdriver, rotate it in a way like that, so that you could shove a large screwdriver in like that, and the screwdriver will either rest over here as a blocking point to stop this from spinning when you're loosening it, or when you're tightening it, you're going to rotate the drive shaft so that you can stick your screwdriver in here and tighten the bolts, and that'll stop it from spinning. And you're going to end up doing one bolt at a time, rotating your drive shaft so that the bottom bolt is way at the bottom, so that you have more space right here to tuck your bolt in. So once you do that, thread it in a little bit and thread it in most of the way. Don't tighten it yet, just thread it in all the way. Then take your screwdriver out, rotate it to the next one is at the bottom. Stick your bolt in and keep doing that until you've done all four. Once you're done with all four, stick your screwdriver in, brace it, and start cranking it down nice and tight. Now we have brand new bolts and a brand new spacer in here, and now we don't have to worry about replacing our front drive shaft, and everything is good to go. So again, this would be the budget-friendly way. Now, is it the best way? Probably not. A brand new extended drive shaft is probably the best way to go, but that's also the most expensive way to go. Now at the back, I'm just using the Skyjacker carrier bearing drop bracket here, which kept my drive shaft in line, so I'm good to go. Okay, and real quick, I did go ahead and drill a hole and tapped it for a 3/8 bolt that comes with the kit. So now my brake line extension kit is now bolted to the frame, and it's nice and sturdy, and we are good to go. Now you could tap a second bolt if needed, but I just did one for now because that's really all you need for a brake line extension bracket. So I did this on both sides, so now everything is stable and bracketed to the frame, and we are good to go. Okay, so we are all done. We got the Skyjacker 8.5-inch suspension lift installed on my 2015 Ford F350 Powerstroke, and this is a basic XL package. Again, my goal for this truck build was to start with a budget-friendly work truck package and take it from a basic work truck package up to something more custom looking. But overall, as you can see, it looks pretty good. Now real quick, don't worry, these are not the final wheels. I have the new wheels sitting over here. I have the Arkon 26 by 14 black and milled wheels here with 38 by 15.5-inch off-road tires there. Those will be getting mounted tomorrow, but for today I just wanted to finish up this lift kit video. But overall, the lift kit was really not that bad to install. If I would compare this Skyjacker 8.5-inch lift kit install to maybe my McGoy's 8-inch lift install that I did on my Ram 2500, or the Striker off-road 8-inch lift kit that I installed on my last black F350, I would say this one was probably just as simple as those, if not a tad bit easier. All the parts were here, everything lined up, the coils lined up, the shocks lined up, the brake extension kit lined up on the front and back, the 4 links lined up, everything pretty much lined up pretty simple and easy. The Skyjacker dual steering stabilizer hooked up real nice and easy. So again, overall, doing this in my driveway was really not that bad. The hardest part of this install is honestly just jacking the frame high enough to get the axles to droop low enough to fit in your coils and fit in your blocks in the back. Other than that, the rest was pretty easy. But as you can see here, it has a really nice stance. It will be a few inches taller once I put the new wheels on, because again, these are just 35-inch tires here on 20-inch wheels. But once I put the 38-inch tires on here, it is going to raise the truck up a little bit higher. But overall, it looks real good. That's what it looks like from a low standpoint here. The 4 lengths are really nice. Everything's nice and tight. The truck is aligned. Everything drives nice and straight. So let's go ahead and just do a little walk around. Again, these are the sway bar drop brackets. This is the Skyjacker dual steering stabilizer here. We got the new drop pitman arm here. We got the new track bar drop bracket here. We have the new brake line extension kit here. We got the new coils here. We got the new Skyjacker shocks there. We got the new 4 links installed on both sides there. If we come around the back, This bottom leaf right here that I'm pointing at right here, that's our new add leaf that we had installed. We got our new longer U-bolts in. We do have the double stack block, which is not my favorite thing. If I was gonna say anything negative about this lift kit, it would be this double stack block. I really just don't like having two blocks stacked on top of each other. Even though this is nice and tight, sometimes these blocks can kind of shift a little bit. And again, they're not gonna go anywhere because they do have a pin that pins this block to this block, and they are under tight pressure with the U-bolts. I'm just not a big fan of having them two stacked together, so I'll either end up taking this to my buddy's shop and having him weld these two together, or I might just eventually just find a taller block in the back and do it that way. But we got the new shock in, we got the new brake line extension kit in the back. So again, everything's nice and good, and I gotta say, it drives pretty nice. I don't have any issues driving it. It drives straight, it drives smooth. Again, no issues with this. Now I did go ahead and cut my front bumper on a nice angle there. So I just removed, there was a metal bracket sitting right in here that I removed. It pretty much just holds your fog light in if you wanted to use fog lights, but I'll probably do something more custom down the road, so I'm not worried about that. So I unbolted that bracket, and then I just cut my bumpers on a nice angle to give me a nice bit of extra room clearance for when I put the new 38s on. Again, it looks real good from the front. That's what it looks like there. Again, everything's nice and cut on an angle. Everything looks real good. So again, I'd say this install was a success, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I'm pretty happy with how it rides. But at the end of the day, the whole goal of doing this Skyjacker 8.5-inch lift kit on this budget-friendly F350 build was to compare a budget-friendly 8-inch lift kit. Now, yes, this is an 8.5-inch lift kit, but I'm comparing this 8.5-inch budget-friendly lift kit to much more expensive 8-inch lift kit, like the 8-inch McGoy's lift kit, the 8-inch Striker off-road lift kit, the 8-inch Wicket lift kit, all of those. Now, yes, those are high-quality companies. Their parts are going to look a little fancier with the extra milling. So yes, those lift kits are great if you're really trying to take your truck to truck shows and you're really competing at that level of quality, then yes, they're probably good for that. But in terms of just a high quality lift kit that's going to lift your truck and make it look awesome, I don't really think you need to spend that much money on those much more expensive lift kits, because there are more budget friendly options out there, such as this Skyjacker 8.5-inch lift kit for the Ford F350. Again, this even came with a 4-link in the front. You would spend probably $5,000 to $8,000 on an 8-inch lift kit at one of the higher name brand companies and still end up with radius arms. If you would upgrade to 4-link systems with those companies, you're probably talking anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. But this particular Skyjacker 8.5-inch lift kit with the 4 links, with the upgraded M95 shocks and the additional drop pitman arm, also adding in the cost of the spacer that I put in the front drive shaft, adding all that together, I was still probably under $3,000. So at the end of the day, my overall impressions of the Skyjacker 8.5-inch suspension lift kit for the Ford F350, I definitely give it a thumbs up and give it a go. It's a high quality kit. Yes, there were a couple small parts that were not finished, which you would probably have to paint or powder coat, but again, that's very minor. But again, putting all those little minor details out of the side, I highly recommend this lift kit because I do think it's a quality lift kit and you're going to save a ton of money. So there you go, everybody. So at the end of the day, my overall impressions of the Skyjacker 8.5-inch suspension lift for my 2015 Ford F350, I definitely give it a thumbs up and give it a go. The installation was pretty simple. It wasn't any harder or easier than any other lift kit that I installed. All the parts were there, all the parts lined up, everything fit, and it rides really nice. So if you're looking for a taller lift kit for your Super Duty, you don't want to spend that much money, I definitely recommend checking out the Skyjacker lift kit. But that's going to be it for today's video. I hope this video helped some of you out. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button and like this video. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments section, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And also do me a favor, subscribe to the channel because it definitely helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. So that's it. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you. I truly appreciate you all. And as always, see you in the next video.